hell are you doing here? Shouldn't you be crawling back to whatever hood you came from?
Julian Taylor, 34, black, rips out his earbud.
What did you just say to me? See, your kind don't belong here! Only reason a black man runs this early is because he stole something. So what was it? You'll arrest me for jogging?
The cop grabs Julian's arm, twists hard, slams his face against the cruiser hood. Cuffs bite into wrist bone. Cold.
Maybe now you'll learn how to cooperate.
Personal. A woman covers her mouth.
God.
A man with a stroller backs
Let's just
away.
go.
Nobody says a word. Then something slips from Julian's waistband. A leather case cracks open on the asphalt. The cop glances down, and every word dies in his throat.
What the hell?
What was inside didn't just take those cuffs off.
No.
It put them on someone
Grown man
else.
today.
Let me rewind. 30 minutes before those cuffs clicked shut, Julian Taylor's alarm went off at 5:45, same time as every morning. No snooze, no hesitation. His feet hit the cold hardwood before his eyes were fully open. 15 years in the United States Army wired that into him. The kind of discipline that doesn't care if it's Saturday. He splashed cold water on his face, brushed his teeth, pulled on a faded gray army t-shirt, the cotton soft and thin from 100 washes. Black running shorts, white sneakers worn down at the heels. He grabbed 3 things from the kitchen counter: phone, house key, and a small leather case holding his Department of Defense military ID. Lieutenant Colonel Julian Taylor, Office of the Inspector General. That ID never left his side, not once in 15 years. On base, off base, on vacation, didn't matter. It was habit. The kind of habit the military drills into you until it feels like part of your body. His wife, Denise, was still asleep. He kissed her forehead without waking her, pulled the front door shut behind him. The morning air hit his lungs, cool, damp, smelling like wet soil and fresh-cut grass. Fog sat low across the neighborhood like a thin white blanket. Ridgemont Memorial Park was 4 blocks from his house. Julian and Denise moved here 8 months ago. Nice neighborhood. Quiet streets, big lawns. The kind of place where people leave their garage doors open and nobody thinks twice. But Ridgemont was changing. Slowly. Uncomfortably. New Black and Latino families had been moving in over the past 2 years, and with every new face came a new phone call to the police. Suspicious person reports in Ridgemont doubled since last year, not because crime went up, because the neighborhood got darker. The Ridgemont Police Department was small. 26 officers, no civilian oversight board, no external review process. Complaints went in one door and disappeared out the other. The old guard ran things their way, and nobody asked questions. Julian hit the park trail at 6:10. His breathing settled into rhythm, his muscles loosened. The fog wrapped around the trees and the lamp posts, turning everything soft. A robin sang from somewhere above him. An elderly white woman walked her golden retriever on the opposite path. She saw Julian, smiled, waved. He waved back. He'd seen her every Saturday for months. She knew his name. He knew her dog's name, Biscuit. This was his time. The only hour in the day where his mind went quiet. No case files, no misconduct reports, no footage of officers doing things that made his stomach turn. At the Pentagon, Julian spent his days reviewing the worst of law enforcement: excessive force, unlawful detentions, civil rights violations. He knew exactly what unchecked authority looked like. He'd read thousands of pages of it. But out here, on this trail, he was just a man running. Meanwhile, parked at the north entrance of the park, a black and white Ridgemont PD cruiser sat idling. Officer Craig Dutton, 41, 12 years on the force, leaned back in the driver's seat, coffee in one hand, the other resting on the steering wheel. His eyes tracked the trail through the windshield. His partner, Officer Brenda Nolan, 29, sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone. She'd been paired with Dutton for 3 months. Long enough to know how he operated, long enough to know when to stay quiet. Dutton had 6 excessive force complaints in his file. 6. Every single one cleared by internal review. No discipline, no retraining, not even a written warning. As far as the department was concerned, Craig Dutton was clean. He spotted Julian coming around the bend. Gray shirt, black skin, running. Dutton set his coffee in the cup holder. His eyes narrowed. Another one, he muttered. 6 in the morning and they're already out here. Nolan glanced up from her phone, said nothing. Dutton reached for the radio, keyed in. Dispatch Unit 14. I've got a suspicious individual on foot in Ridgemont Memorial. Black male, athletic build, heading south on the main trail. Going to make contact. There was no description to match. No reported crime. No probable cause. Just a black man running in a white neighborhood. Dutton pulled the cruiser forward. Julian heard the siren before he saw the lights. One short chirp. The kind that doesn't mean emergency, the kind that means stop. He slowed his pace, pulled out his right earbud, turned around. The cruiser sat 30 feet behind him, red and blue lights cutting through the morning fog. The engine idled low. The headlights pinned Julian in place like a spotlight on a stage. The driver's door opened. Craig Dutton stepped out, slow, deliberate, the way a man moves when he wants you to know he's in charge. His right hand rested on his belt, not on his weapon, but close enough to make a point. His chest was puffed, his jaw set. Morning, Dutton said, but it wasn't a greeting. It was a warning. Julian stood still on the trail, hands loose at his sides, visible. He knew, from years of training, from years of reviewing exactly this kind of encounter, that the first 10 seconds set the tone. Stay calm. Stay visible. Don't give them a reason. Morning, officer. Something I can help you with? Dutton walked closer. His boots crunched on the gravel. He stopped about 5 feet from Julian and looked him up and down. Slow, head to toe and back again. The way you'd look at something you were trying to decide about. We got a call, Dutton said. Someone fitting your description in the area. Julian's face didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. He'd heard that line before, not directed at him, but in case files, in body cam footage, in transcript after transcript of stops that never should have happened. What description would that be? Julian asked. I'm asking the questions. I understand that, but I'd like to know what description I'm fitting. Dutton tilted his head. A smile crept across his face. Not a friendly one. You're a big guy. Athletic. Running through the park before sunrise. That's enough for me. Julian took a breath, kept his voice level. My name is Julian Taylor. I live at 44 Birchwood Lane, 4 blocks east of here. I run this trail every morning. Dutton didn't blink, didn't write anything down, didn't reach for his radio to verify. Got any ID on you? I don't carry my driver's license when I run, but I just gave you my name and address. You can verify both. Dutton sucked his teeth, shook his head slowly. No ID. That's a problem. It's not a requirement to carry identification while jogging in a public park, officer. Don't tell me what's required. The passenger door opened. Brenda Nolan stepped out. She stayed near the cruiser, arms folded, weight shifting from one foot to the other. Her eyes moved between Dutton and Julian like she was watching something she didn't want to see, but couldn't look away from. Dutton turned to her. Run the name, Julian Taylor, 44 Birchwood. Nolan nodded and leaned into the cruiser to use the computer. While they waited, Dutton made Julian stand at the front of the cruiser, hands on the hood, legs apart. The metal was cold and slick with dew. Julian pressed his palms flat against it and stared straight ahead. He could feel people watching. The park was waking up. A couple in matching windbreakers walked their dog on the far side of the trail. They slowed when they saw the lights. The woman leaned into the man and whispered something. They kept walking, but their eyes stayed locked on Julian. A white man in his 60s sat on a bench nearby, newspaper open on his lap. He looked up over his reading glasses, looked at Julian on the hood, looked at Dutton standing over him. Then he looked back down at his paper. Nobody stopped. Nobody asked if Julian was okay. Nobody said a word. That silence. Julian knew what it meant. He'd read about it in 100 case files. Bystanders who see something wrong and choose comfort over confrontation. It's not that they don't care. It's that caring costs something. Nolan's voice came from inside the cruiser. "Craig." Dutton turned. "He's clean. No warrants, no priors, no flags. Address checks out. 44 Birchwood Lane, registered to a Julian and Denise Taylor." Julian exhaled through his nose. There it was. Clean record, verified address, confirmed identity. Every box checked. This should be over. Dutton stared at the computer screen through the cruiser window for a long moment. His tongue pressed against the inside of his cheek. Then he turned back to Julian. "All right," he said. "Here's the thing." Julian waited. "Clean record doesn't mean clean intentions. I've been doing this 12 years. I know when something's off. And something about you, this whole situation, feels off to me." Julian's hands were still on the hood. The metal was getting warmer under his palms. He could feel his heartbeat in his wrists. "Officer, you have my name, my address, a clean background check. What else do you need?" "I need you to stop talking and let me do my job." "Your job right now is to let me go. You have no probable cause." Dutton stepped closer, close enough that Julian could smell the coffee on his breath, close enough that the conversation stopped being professional and started being personal. "You think you're smart," Dutton said. Low, quiet, the kind of quiet that's louder than yelling. "You think throwing around words like probable cause makes you special? I've dealt with 100 guys like you. You all talk the same. You all think you know the law better than the man wearing the badge." Julian said nothing. His jaw tightened, but he didn't move. "Here's what's going to happen," Dutton said. "I'm going to detain you for further investigation. You were evasive, uncooperative, refused to provide ID. That's enough." "I gave you my name and address. Your own system confirmed it. That's the opposite of evasive." "Turn around." "On what charge?" "Turn around." Nolan stepped forward from the cruiser. Her hand hovered near her chest, like she was about to say something. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked at the ground. Julian turned around, not because he agreed, not because he believed this was lawful, because he knew, with absolute clarity, what happens to a black man who physically resists a police officer on a Saturday morning in a white neighborhood. He'd seen those files too. Dutton pulled out his handcuffs. The click of the first cuff was sharp. Metal on skin, cold against the warmth of Julian's wrist. Dutton squeezed it one notch tighter than necessary. Then the second cuff. Same thing, tight enough to leave marks. Julian felt his fingers start to tingle. He flexed them once. The metal didn't give. A woman on the trail, mid-30s, white, ponytail, running shoes, stopped dead. She pulled out her phone and started recording. She stood about 30 feet away, close enough to capture everything, far enough to stay safe. An older couple walked past. The woman looked at Julian with something between pity and fear. The man put his hand on her back and steered her forward. "Don't get involved. Not our business." Julian stood there, hands cuffed behind his back, face still calm, eyes straight ahead. while the Saturday morning world moved around him like he was a piece of furniture someone had left on the sidewalk. He thought about the files on his desk at the Pentagon, the body cam footage he reviewed last Tuesday, a black teenager handcuffed for sitting in his own car, the one from Thursday, a Latino father detained for picking up his daughter from school. And now here he was, standing inside the exact kind of case he investigated for a living. The irony didn't sting. It burned. Dutton walked back to the cruiser and leaned against the door, arms crossed, looking at Julian like a hunter admiring a catch. "See?" he said to Nolan. "They always calm down once the cuffs go on." Nolan said nothing. She stared at her own shoes. Dutton let Julian stand there for a full 3 minutes before he moved again. 3 minutes. Hands cuffed behind his back, wrists already going numb. The fog thinning out just enough to let the early sun through, warm on Julian's face, cold everywhere else. Dutton pushed off the cruiser and walked toward him, slow. That same deliberate swagger, like every step was a performance. "All right," Dutton said. "Standard procedure. I'm gonna pat you down." Julian's voice came out flat, controlled. "You have no legal basis to search me. I haven't been charged. I haven't been arrested. You have no probable cause and no consent." Dutton stopped in front of him, smiled. That same smile, the one that never reached his eyes. "See, that's where you're wrong. You're detained. That gives me the right to conduct a pat-down for officer safety. Basic Terry stop." A Terry stop requires reasonable, articulable suspicion of criminal activity. You've articulated nothing. I articulated plenty. You were evasive. You were hostile. You're in an area with recent criminal activity. That's 3 for 3. I gave you my name, my address, and your own system cleared me. None of that is evasive or hostile. Dutton leaned in. "You done playing lawyer? Turn around and spread your legs, or I add resisting to the list." Julian stared at him for a long beat. The kind of silence that fills a room even when you're standing outside. Then he turned. Dutton started the pat-down. But it wasn't a pat-down. Not really. Not the kind they teach at the academy. Quick, professional, targeted to waistband and pockets. This was slow, thorough, in the wrong way. Dutton's hands pressed harder than they needed to, lingered longer than they should have. He squeezed Julian's arms, ran his palms down Julian's ribs like he was searching for something hidden between the bones. Julian's jaw clenched so tight his teeth hurt. 2 women on the trail had stopped walking. They stood side by side, phones out, recording. A teenage boy on a bicycle slowed to a stop near the water fountain and watched. Dutton's hands reached Julian's pockets. He pulled out the house key, looked at it, tossed it onto the hood of the cruiser like it was garbage. Then the phone. He turned it over in his hand, pressed the power button. The lock screen lit up. A photo of Julian and Denise at a military gala, both in formal dress, smiling. Dutton stared at the photo for a second, then snorted. "Nice costume," he said. He set the phone on the hood next to the key. Julian didn't respond, but something shifted behind his eyes. The calm was still there, but underneath it, something hotter was building, the kind of heat that doesn't show on the surface but could melt steel if you let it. Dutton moved to Julian's waistband. His fingers found the leather case clipped to the inside, the one holding the military ID. He tugged at it. "What's this?" "That's my identification. The one you asked for 5 minutes ago?" "I'll decide what it is." Dutton yanked it free. The clip caught on the fabric of Julian's shorts. Dutton pulled harder. The case slipped out of his grip, tumbled through the air, and hit the asphalt with a sharp crack. It landed face down. Dutton didn't pick it up. Not yet. He was too focused on Julian, too deep in the performance. He stepped around to face Julian head on, crossed his arms. Here's what I think happened, Dutton said. I think you were casing houses. I think you were using this little jogging routine as cover. And I think when you saw my cruiser, you panicked. I didn't panic. I stopped when you told me to stop. You hesitated. I removed my earbud. Same thing. It's not remotely the same thing. Dutton's nostrils flared. He stepped closer, so close Julian could see the pores on his nose, the coffee stain on his bottom lip. You know what your problem is? Dutton said. You think because you can string a sentence together, because you know a couple of legal terms, that makes you different from every other guy I pull over out here. But you're not. You're all the same to me. Every single one. The words hung in the morning air like smoke. Julian looked at him. Really looked at him. Not with anger. Not with fear. With something worse. Recognition. He'd seen this face before. Not Dutton's face, specifically, but the face. The expression. The certainty. He'd seen it in 100 body cam videos. The officer who's already decided. Who stopped listening 10 seconds into the encounter. Who sees a color before he sees a person. Julian had reviewed cases like this professionally. He'd written reports about officers like this. He'd recommended terminations for behavior like this. And now he was living inside one of those reports. Nolan stood by the passenger door. She hadn't moved in minutes. Her arms were crossed so tight her knuckles were white. She kept glancing at the bystanders with their phones. At the woman 30 feet away who'd been recording since the cuffs went on. Craig, Nolan said quietly. Maybe we should just... I got this. He came back clean. Maybe we should cut him loose and... Brenda. Dutton didn't turn around. I said I got this. Nolan pressed her lips together, looked at Julian, looked at the ground, stepped back. She knew. Julian could see it in her face. She knew this was wrong. She knew there was no probable cause. She knew Dutton was operating on nothing but bias and ego. And she chose silence. She chose her career over his rights. She chose the uniform over the oath. Julian would remember that. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Dutton ran Julian's name again. Same result. Clean. He called dispatch for any reports of break-ins near the park. Nothing in the last 48 hours. No stolen vehicles. No burglaries. No descriptions matching anyone. Every excuse Dutton had used was crumbling in real time, and he knew it. Julian could see the frustration building, the jaw grinding, the weight shifting, the fingers flexing. But Dutton didn't let go. Men like Dutton never let go. Because letting go means admitting you were wrong, and admitting you were wrong to a black man in handcuffs? That was something Craig Dutton's pride would never allow. All right, Dutton said. I'm taking you in. Julian's head turned. Excuse me? You're coming to the station. I'm not satisfied with your answers. You haven't asked me a question in 10 minutes. I don't need to. Your behavior speaks for itself. What behavior? I'm standing here in handcuffs doing exactly what you told me to do. Dutton grabbed Julian's arm and started walking him toward the back of the cruiser. Julian's sneakers scraped against the pavement. The rear door of the cruiser was already open, the back seat divided by a metal cage, the vinyl cracked and peeling. That's when a voice cut through the morning. Julian! Both men turned. Denise Fullerton was walking fast across the grass. Not running. Walking. The kind of walk that carries more weight than a sprint. She wore a gray sweater and jeans. Her eyes were locked on her husband. Her face cycled through 3 emotions in 2 seconds. Shock, fear, fury. She reached the trail, saw Julian's wrists behind his back, saw the red marks where the cuffs had been grinding, saw Dutton's hand on her husband's arm. I'm his wife, she said. I'm also a civil rights attorney. What is the probable cause for this detention? Dutton's grip on Julian's arm loosened. just slightly. "Ma'am, step back. This doesn't concern you." "He's my husband in handcuffs with no charge. It absolutely concerns me." She pulled out her phone, hit record, held it steady. "Badge number, now." Dutton rattled it off with a smirk, like it was a joke, like none of this would matter by lunchtime. Denise turned the camera to Nolan. "And yours?" Nolan gave her badge number. No smirk, no eye contact. "This is now being recorded," Denise said, "along with every phone on this trail. I want you to understand that clearly before you take another step." Dutton looked around. For the first time, he seemed to notice the phones. The woman 30 feet away, the teenager on the bike, the two women on the trail, the old man on the bench who'd finally put down his newspaper. For half a second, something flickered in Dutton's eyes. Not doubt. He was too far gone for doubt. But awareness. The awareness of a man who realizes the room is watching. He shoved Julian toward the rear door of the cruiser anyway. Julian stumbled. His shoulder hit the door frame. Denise shouted, sharp, legal, precise. "That is unlawful use of force on a detained individual who is not resisting." Dutton turned to Nolan. "Get her back, or I'm citing her for obstruction." The park had gone silent. Every bird, every footstep, every breath held. The leather case was still on the ground. It had been sitting there on the asphalt for almost 15 minutes, face down, cracked open at the hinge, forgotten, because Dutton never bothered to look. He was too busy performing, too busy proving a point that didn't exist. But Nolan saw it. She'd been staring at it for the last 30 seconds, maybe longer. While Dutton shoved Julian toward the cruiser, while Denise shouted legal warnings, while the phones kept recording. Nolan's eyes kept drifting back to that small leather case on the ground. She walked over, bent down, picked it up, turned it over, and the color left her face like someone had pulled the plug on a bathtub. Inside, behind a clear plastic window, was a United States Department of Defense Common Access card. A photo of Julian in full dress uniform, ribbons across his chest, eyes forward. The kind of photo that says this man has seen things you can't imagine and handled every single one. Next to the photo, printed in bold block letters, Lieutenant Colonel Julian Taylor, Office of the Inspector General, Department of Defense. Nolan's hands started shaking. Not a little. Visibly. The kind of shaking you can't fake and can't hide. Craig. Dutton was still gripping Julian's arm, trying to guide him into the back seat. He didn't turn around. Craig? What? Stop. You need to stop. Right now. Something in her voice made him pause. Not the words, the sound, the pitch, the crack in it. Dutton turned around and saw Nolan holding the leather case open, facing him, like a mirror she was forcing him to look into. He squinted, read the card, read it again. Lieutenant Colonel, Inspector General, Department of Defense. Dutton's hand dropped from Julian's arm like he'd touched something hot. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. He read the card a third time, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic. They didn't. Julian turned around slowly. He didn't jerk free, didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. The cuffs were still on his wrists, the red marks were still visible. And his eyes, calm, steady, absolute, carried more authority than any badge Dutton had ever worn. "Lieutenant Colonel Julian Taylor," he said. Quiet, almost conversational, which made it worse. "I serve in the Office of the Inspector General at the Pentagon. My division investigates excessive force, unlawful detention, and civil rights violations committed by law enforcement officers operating under federal jurisdiction or receiving federal funding." He paused, Let that settle. Ridgemont Police Department receives an annual community-oriented policing grant from the Department of Justice. That grant comes with federal civil rights compliance requirements, which means your department falls under my office's investigative authority. Another pause, longer this time. Which means you, Officer Dutton, fall under my authority. The silence that followed was so complete, you could hear the dew dripping off the park bench 30 feet away. A bird sang. Nobody else made a sound. Dutton's face had gone from red to gray. Not white, gray. The color of a man whose brain is running every possible outcome and finding nothing good at the end of any of them. His lips moved but produced no words. His hands hung at his sides like they'd forgotten what they were for. He tried. He actually tried to speak. Look, this was just... We were responding to a... Take the cuffs off. 3 words. No yelling, no threats. Just 3 words delivered with the quiet certainty of a man who has spent 15 years holding people accountable and has never once needed to raise his voice to do it. Dutton didn't move. Take the cuffs off. Nolan moved first. She stepped forward fast, almost stumbling, and reached for Julian's wrists with hands that were still shaking. She fumbled with the key. It took her 3 tries to get it into the lock. The first cuff released with a click, then the second. Julian brought his hands forward, rotated his wrists. The skin was raw. Red lines circled both wrists like bracelets made of pain. He flexed his fingers once, twice, let the blood flow back in. Denise lowered her phone, but didn't stop recording. The bystanders stood frozen. The woman 30 feet away, the teenager on the bike, the 2 women on the trail. Every single one of them still had their phones raised. Every single one of them had just captured a United States military officer being uncuffed after an unlawful detention. And the footage wasn't going anywhere. Then, tires on gravel. A second cruiser pulled into the park entrance. Sergeant Ray Ballard, shift supervisor. He'd been monitoring the radio and heard Dutton's initial call. Suspicious individual, black male, no further details. When no follow-up came for 20 minutes, he drove out himself. Ballard stepped out of his cruiser. Took 3 seconds to read the scene. A black man rubbing raw wrists, an attorney wife with a phone recording, multiple bystanders with cameras, one of his officers looking like he'd just swallowed his own tongue, and another one holding a military ID with trembling hands. Ballard walked to Nolan, took the ID, read it. He closed his eyes, held them shut for a full 3 seconds. The kind of pause a man takes when he realizes the next 5 minutes are going to define the rest of his career. He opened his eyes, looked at Dutton. Give me your body camera, now. Then he looked at Nolan. Yours too. Then he looked at Julian. Sir, I am deeply sorry. Craig, get those cuffs off. He saw Julian's freed wrists, saw the marks. His jaw tightened. Both of you, back to the station, immediately. Do not speak to anyone. Do not stop anywhere. Go. Dutton and Nolan drove back to the station in silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind where every second feels like sitting in a room with a ticking bomb. Nolan stared out the passenger window. Her hands were still trembling in her lap. Dutton gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles looked like they were trying to break through his skin. Neither of them said a word. Because there were no words. Not for this. Back at the park, Sergeant Ballard stood in front of Julian and Denise. His posture was different from Dutton's. No puffed chest, no swagger. He stood the way a man stands when he knows he's representing something that just failed. Mr. Taylor, Lieutenant Colonel, I want to apologize. On behalf of the Ridgemont Police Department, what happened here this morning was unacceptable. I watched enough of it to know that. And I'm certain when we review the body camera footage, it will confirm everything I saw. Julian looked at him, not with rage, not with gratitude, with the kind of exhaustion that comes from living inside a system you've spent your career trying to fix and realizing it still got you. Your apology is noted, Sergeant, but an apology doesn't fix the policy that put me in cuffs. It doesn't explain why a man with no warrants, no record, and a verified address was handcuffed in a public park for 20 minutes. And it doesn't undo the fact that your officer told me my skin color was his probable cause. Ballard didn't argue, didn't deflect. He nodded once, slow, heavy, and said, "You're right." Denise stepped forward, phone still in hand, still recording. "Sergeant Ballard, for the record, I will be filing a formal complaint with Internal Affairs. I will also be filing a Section 1983 civil rights claim in federal court, and I will be submitting a public records request for every second of body camera footage from both officers, today." Ballard nodded again. "That is your right, ma'am. I won't stand in the way of any of it." "One more thing," Denise said. "My husband's office has independent federal jurisdiction over departments receiving DOJ funding. You should be aware that this isn't just a local matter anymore." Ballard exhaled through his nose. The kind of exhale that carries the weight of a man who just realized his department is about to be turned inside out. "Understood," he said. By 9 o'clock that morning, less than 3 hours after Julian's run began, Craig Dutton was placed on administrative leave. Effective immediately. Badge surrendered. Firearm collected. He was escorted to his locker, watched as he emptied it into a cardboard box, and walked out the back door of the station without making eye contact with a single colleague. Brendan Nolan received the same. Suspended pending investigation. Not for what she did, but for what she didn't do. Failure to intervene. Failure to de-escalate. Failure to uphold the oath she swore when she pinned that badge to her chest. Both body cameras were logged into evidence, sealed, time-stamped, chain of custody documented. But the body cameras weren't the only footage. By noon, the bystander video hit the internet. The woman on the trail, the one who'd been recording from 30 feet away, posted it on social media with a single caption. "This man was handcuffed for jogging in Ridgemont Park this morning. Watch what happens." 7 minutes and 22 seconds. That's how long the video ran. 7 minutes of Dutton's aggression, Julian's composure, the cuffing, Denise's legal challenge, Nolan's silence. And the moment, the exact frame-by-frame moment, Nolan found that ID, and her face collapsed. By 3 o'clock, the video had 500,000 views. By 6 o'clock, 2 million. The hashtags wrote themselves. Hashtag free to jog started trending at 4 p.m. Hashtag LTC. Julian Taylor followed an hour later. By evening, both were in the top 10 nationally. Terrence Wilder, a local news anchor known for his investigative pieces, led the 6 o'clock broadcast with the footage. He played the bystander video side by side with the body cam footage his station had obtained through an emergency public records request. The headline ran across the bottom of the screen in bold white letters. "Ridgemont officer cuffs decorated military official during morning jog. Federal investigation expected." Julian and Denise watched the broadcast from their living room couch. Denise had her laptop open, drafting the Section 1983 complaint. Julian sat next to her, a bag of ice on his right wrist, watching his own face on the television screen. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, quietly, 6 complaints. 6. And they let him keep doing this. Denise reached over and put her hand on his knee. "Not anymore." The investigation moved fast, faster than anyone at Ridgemont PD expected. Within 48 hours, 2 separate probes were open. The first, Internal Affairs, run by the department itself. The second, and the one that made every officer in that building lose sleep, a federal civil rights investigation launched by the Office of the Inspector General in coordination with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. Julian didn't lead the federal investigation himself. He couldn't. He was the victim. But his office assigned it to a team he'd personally trained. A team that knew exactly where to look, exactly what to pull, and exactly how to build a case that doesn't fall apart on the stand. They started with Dutton's personnel file. 6 prior complaints. The investigators laid them out on a conference table like pieces of a puzzle that everyone had refused to assemble. Complaint 1. A black teenager stopped for riding his bike too fast through a residential street. Detained for 45 minutes. No charges filed. Complaint dismissed internally. Complaint 2. A Latino man pulled over for a broken taillight that wasn't broken. Vehicle searched without consent. Nothing found. Complaint dismissed. Complaint 3. A black man in his 50s stopped while walking home from a grocery store. Dutton told him he matched a description. Same phrase, same playbook. Complaint dismissed. And then there were the 2 that hit closest to home. Complaint 5. A black high school track coach detained while running drills with his team at Ridgemont Memorial Park. Same park, same trail. Dutton told him the team's presence was creating a disturbance. 14 teenage athletes watched their coach get patted down on the grass. Complaint dismissed. Complaint 6. A black father stopped while pushing his daughter in a stroller. Dutton said the man was loitering suspiciously. The man was waiting for his wife to come out of a bakery. Complaint dismissed. 6 complaints. 6 black and brown men. 6 dismissals. 0 consequences. The investigators pulled the internal review files for each case. Every single one had been handled by the same review board. 3 senior officers, all appointed by the chief, none with any external oversight. The reviews lasted an average of 11 days. None included interviews with the complainants. None resulted in any discipline beyond a verbal note in Dutton's file. The pattern wasn't just clear, it was institutional. The body cam footage from Julian's detention sealed the rest. Investigators watched every second, from the moment Dutton keyed his radio with "suspicious individual, black male," to the moment Ballard ordered him to surrender his camera. At no point in the footage did Dutton articulate a specific crime. At no point did he reference a real description. At no point did he explain probable cause. And the moment where he told Julian, "Your skin tone is my probable cause," that single sentence would become the centerpiece of the federal prosecution. While the legal machinery turned, the media didn't wait. Terrence Wilder ran a 3-part investigative series on his evening broadcast. Part 1 covered Julian's detention, the footage, the timeline, the facts. Part 2 dug into Ridgemont PD's complaint history. Wilder's team filed public records requests and obtained 5 years of data. The numbers were damning. Black and Latino residents made up 12% of Ridgemont's population, but accounted for 61% of all pedestrian and vehicle stops. Complaint resolution rate, 98% in favor of the officer. Part 3 featured interviews with former victims, the track coach, the father with the stroller, a black nurse who'd been pulled over 3 times in 2 months on her drive home from the hospital. All of them described the same thing, the same language, the same attitude, the same assumption of guilt. The community responded. A town hall meeting at Ridgemont High School drew over 400 people, standing room only. The gymnasium was hot and loud and angry. Former victims spoke at the microphone. Parents spoke. Teachers spoke. A 17-year-old girl stood up and said she was afraid to walk to school alone because she didn't want to be the next person on a viral video. A petition demanding Dutton's termination and a full departmental overhaul collected 250,000 signatures in 9 days. The trial began 11 weeks later. Federal charges came first. Deprivation of civil rights under color of law. 18 U.S.C. Section 242. The statute that exists specifically for moments like this. For officers who use their badge as a weapon instead of a shield. State charges followed. Unlawful detention, unlawful search, filing a false police report, because there was no description. There was never any description. Dutton invented it on the spot and entered it into the radio log as justification. The trial lasted 6 days. The prosecution played the body cam footage on a screen large enough for every juror to see the pores on Dutton's face when he said, "Your skin tone is my probable cause." They played the bystander video. They brought in Nolan, who had agreed to cooperate in exchange for no prison time, and she testified under oath that Dutton had no description, no call, and no reason to initiate the stop. "He saw a black man running," Nolan said. "That was it." Dutton's attorney tried a reasonable suspicion defense. He argued that Dutton had acted on a combination of factors: the early hour, the area's recent crime reports, the subject's behavior. Under cross-examination, the defense collapsed. The prosecutor asked Dutton one question. "Officer Dutton, can you name a single specific fact, other than my client's race, that gave you reasonable suspicion to initiate this stop?" Dutton sat in the witness chair for 9 seconds without speaking. 9 seconds of silence in a courtroom feels like an hour. Then he said, "He was running. In a park." "Yes." "On a jogging trail." "Yes." "In running clothes." Dutton didn't answer. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty. All counts, federal and state. The sentence came down 2 weeks later. 36 months in federal prison. Permanent decertification. Craig Dutton would never serve as a law enforcement officer in any state, in any capacity, for the rest of his life. And $150,000 in civil damages to Julian Taylor. Dutton stood in the courtroom when the sentence was read. He didn't look at Julian. He didn't look at anyone. He stared at the table in front of him, the same way Julian had stared at the hood of that cruiser, and said nothing. Brendan Nolan was terminated from the Ridgemont Police Department. Failure to intervene. Failure to report. Failure to uphold her duty as a sworn officer. She received no prison time in exchange for her testimony, but she lost her badge, her career, and every plan she'd ever made for her future in law enforcement. The consequences didn't stop with the officers. Chief Dorothy Sims held a press conference on the steps of the Ridgemont Municipal Building. She announced a full departmental review, mandatory de-escalation and implicit bias training for every officer, a new civilian oversight board with independent authority to investigate complaints, and the immediate dissolution of the internal review board that had cleared Dutton 6 times. But the biggest blow came from Washington. The Department of Justice placed Ridgemont Police Department under a federal consent decree. 5 years of mandatory federal monitoring, every policy reviewed, every stop documented, every complaint tracked by an outside auditor. The department that had operated without oversight for decades was now under the most intensive form of federal supervision available. Julian was invited to testify before a congressional subcommittee on policing reform. He sat at a long wooden table, microphone in front of him, cameras from every major network pointed at his face. He wore his dress uniform, every ribbon earned, every star in place. He told them what happened in the park. Then he told them about the 6 complaints before him. Then he told them about the thousands of cases his office had reviewed, cases where the victim didn't carry a Pentagon ID, cases where the outcome was different. "I was lucky," Julian said. "Not because of what I did, because of what I carry. Most people who experience what I experienced don't have a title that makes the officer's face go white. And that, right there, is the problem we need to fix." 6 months later, Julian Taylor laced up the same worn-out sneakers, same gray Army t-shirt, Same black shorts, same time, 5:45 alarm, feet on the cold hardwood, no snooze. He stepped outside. The morning air hit his lungs the way it always did, cool, damp, smelling like wet grass and quiet. He ran the same trail, but the trail wasn't the same. The spot where Dutton had forced him onto the cruiser hood, where the cuffs clicked shut and the leather case hit the asphalt, there was a small bronze plaque now, bolted to a stone at the edge of the path. 4 words: dignity cannot be detained. The neighborhood association installed it 3 months after the trial. Julian didn't ask for it. The first time he ran past it, he almost missed it. The second time, he stopped, read it, stood there for a full minute, then kept running. People recognized him now. The elderly woman with the golden retriever stopped to talk instead of just waving. The man on the bench started nodding as Julian passed. A young black kid, maybe 15, started showing up every Saturday morning, running the same trail, same direction. He never spoke to Julian, but he ran behind him, matching his pace, like he was following a path someone had cleared for him. Julian's career accelerated after the trial. The Pentagon promoted him to lead a newly created National Task Force on Bias in Law Enforcement, a direct result of his congressional testimony. His team now worked with departments in 32 states, reviewing use of force policies, auditing complaint systems, building the kind of accountability structures that Ridgemont never had. Denise's nonprofit expanded too. The case became a landmark precedent. The first federal consent decree imposed on a suburban department of fewer than 30 officers. Law schools were already teaching it. Civil rights firms across the country used the case file as a blueprint. On quiet evenings, Julian and Denise sat on their front porch. Coffee for him, tea for her. They didn't talk about the case much anymore. It lived in their bones, in the scar tissue around Julian's wrists that still ached on cold mornings, in the way Denise flinched every time she heard a siren. But they didn't let it own them. Julian knew the fight wasn't over. One case doesn't fix a system. One verdict doesn't rewrite a culture. But it moves the needle. And sometimes, moving the needle is enough to remind people that the needle can be moved. Craig Dutton was 18 months into his 36-month sentence at a federal facility in Virginia. One appeal filed. Denied. No visitors on the log in 4 months. The narration doesn't ask you to feel sorry for him. Actions have consequences. Dutton chose his. Every morning for the next 18 months, he'll wake up in his cell and remember the morning he cuffed the wrong man in a park. Brenda Nolan left law enforcement permanently. She took a job at a community center in a neighboring county. Twice a month, she attended a reconciliation program, sitting across the table from people wronged by officers like the one she used to ride next to. She wasn't redeemed. That word is too clean for what happened. But she was facing it, which is more than most people who choose silence ever do. So here's my question, and I mean this one. If Julian hadn't carried that Pentagon ID, if he was just a regular guy on a morning run, no title, no authority, no leverage, do you honestly believe this story ends the same way? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear it. If this story made you feel something, hit that like button, share it, send it to someone who needs to hear it. If you're new here, subscribe. We tell stories like this every week, stories where silence loses and justice doesn't stay quiet. One last thing before you go. Respect isn't earned by flashing a badge or a title. It's something every person is owed the moment they step outside their front door. Remember that. Every morning, every trail, every run.
6 complaints before Julian, 6 black and brown men, 6 dismissals. It took a Pentagon ID hitting the asphalt for anyone to finally listen. And Julian said it himself. I was lucky, not because of what I did, because of what I carried. That line, that's the whole story right there. A man had to prove he would just to finish a morning job. His dignity didn't free him, his title did. And that's the difference between justice and luck. Real justice didn't check your credential first. It doesn't ask what you carry in your waistband. It sees a human being, and that's enough. So here's what I want you to sit with. If that latter case never fell, if Julian was just a regular man with nothing but a house key and a pair of worn-out sneakers, how many Julian Taylors are out there without the title? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear it. If it hit you, subscribe. We tell stories like this every week. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because respect isn't earned by a badge or a title. It is all the moment you step outside your door.